It truly is a privilege and an honour to be with you today. I love this part of the world, and I've visited this part of the world a lot over the years because my dad and my dad's side of the family actually live up here. So I drove 4 hours up the highway last night, and I was able to stay with Dad last night. So I'm only about a 10-minute drive away from today. So that's been really convenient. I think this is close to, or maybe more than, my 10th occasion that I've had the opportunity to address a gathering such as this. It's really been a great privilege over the last 5 years or so to have the incredible opportunity to speak to View Club events and audiences all around our state. In fact, I've addressed audiences from as far south as Merimbula to Maitland, so and everywhere in between, pretty much. I know that Lorraine, my good friend, and I did the road trip down to Merimbula a number of years ago to speak to the View Clubs down there. So as a result, I recognise a number of familiar faces in the audience. A number of you have probably heard me speak before. A number of you were probably at the national conference in Wollongong last year. So hello to those I've met before. But truth be told, coming to a View Club meeting and seeing the View Club ladies is very much, has the same feeling for me as visiting family. I can't get out of the room without getting my cheeks pinched and without being asked the same questions like, are you taking care of yourself? Do you make sure you eat enough? To which I always answer, yes, I do eat plenty. Only to be told that I couldn't possibly be eating enough because I look all skin and bones. I only wish that was close to being the case. And a new one today was whether I was married yet or not, which, given I'm only 25 and turning 26 in September, it certainly hasn't crossed my mind at this stage of my life, but who knows what the future will hold. But joking aside, what I see today and what I've always observed at View Club events is a room full of loving and dedicated people. People who volunteer so much of their time, money and effort to give disadvantaged Aussie kids a chance in life. So I really just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything you do, and thank you for everything you will continue to do for this great organisation. As I say, I am really thrilled to have the chance to speak because I have the opportunity to talk about one of my favourite organisations, the Smith family, and about one of my favourite topics, education. With your indulgence, in addition to telling my own story about my experience as a Learning for Life student, I'd also like to share some of my thoughts on this important subject area. The title I've given my talk today, and it's the title I gave my talk in Wollongong, is that everyone has the right to rise. Because that, in essence, is what I see as the key focus of what we're all trying to achieve. Now, of course, we are in the midst of an election campaign which doesn't seem to have an end in sight. And being here very much has the feeling of delivering some kind of stump speech. But I assure you that I'm not a candidate who's here to solicit votes from you. I'm not going to tell you that there's never been a more exciting time to be in Maitland, although I am excited to be here. Nor am I going to tell you that I have 100 positive ideas, but I do have some ideas that I want to share with you today. I'd like to begin by reciting a few propositions which I believe are incontestable. These are things that we know, that we all know by and large to be true. The first proposition is that all kids, no matter their background, their postcode, or what their parents do for a living, want to be somebody in life. Right from the youngest age, when kids first begin wondering about who they might become in the future, when they might gaze up at their ceiling before drifting off to sleep at night, envisaging themselves doing amazing things. Kids keep having these dreams, hopes and ambitions right throughout their childhoods. The second is, the overwhelming majority of teachers are dedicated, passionate and enthusiastic about their job and want to help kids excel. The third is, most parents want the best for their children. Fourth, some kids unfortunately don't get to achieve their dreams. They don't get to be the person that they dreamed about when they laid awake at night. Whilst most kids are able to achieve their aspirations in life and to make something of themselves, many do not. And finally, and this is perhaps the most tragic proposition of all, the kids who seem to miss out on their shot at life almost invariably come from poorer or more socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. Why is this the case? What is the connection? I don't believe it's fair just to blame the students. That always seems to be the default explanation for some. If a student didn't do as well, it's obviously because they didn't try hard enough. Undoubtedly, individual effort and initiative is important, and students do need to take responsibility for their own learning. But there are other factors at play which need to be acknowledged. A child will have an immeasurably better start to their school education if the basic inputs into their upbringing are positive rather than negative. Let's face it, no kid chooses to go to a bad school. No kid chooses what their parents do for a living. No kid has any say in the value their own parents place on their self-worth. No kid chooses to live in poverty. But every child should have the right to rise to his or her potential. The reality is that there is deep inequality in this country. That inequality is writ large in public school classrooms across Australia. The gap between rich and poor seems to get wider and wider every decade. But that said, I don't think we should be just obsessed with the gap itself. I mean, I certainly wouldn't rather that the poor were poorer as long as the rich were a little less rich. That is to say, we shouldn't focus on the size of the gap itself. But clearly there is a divergence in the opportunities that are available in life for someone whose parents work and have the capacity to invest in their child's future compared with those who don't. The reality is that so many children are caught in the trap and tragedy of chronic intergenerational poverty. Just like the children I grew up with in my old neighbourhood, people who I would describe as living in the shadows. These people are forgotten about far too frequently by policymakers and governments at all levels, often bearing the brunt of poor choices their parents make and punished as a result for no reason. It is truly a national disgrace that there are children in this country who wake up every day without a future. A report was released last year called the Dropping Off the Edge Report, which was compiled using Australian Bureau of Statistics data and other resources such as NAPLAN results and the Australian Early Learning Index, as well as data from human services agencies across the states and territories. The report looks at social indicators including long-term unemployment, education standards, domestic violence and criminal convictions, and it showed the disadvantage has become entrenched in many communities. In New South Wales, about 25% of prisoners come from just 3% of the state's postcodes. In South Australia, they come from 5.5% of regions, and in Victoria, a quarter of prisoners, come from just 2% of postcodes. Here in New South Wales, 9 of our 12 most disadvantaged communities have seen no improvement in their rankings, and others are also sliding backwards. For example, the Sydney suburb of Claymore was in the second least severe of six bands of disadvantage in 2007, but now it's in the most severe bracket. There have been similar slides in rural New South Wales communities too, such as Walgett and Lightning Ridge. The report found that disadvantaged communities shared common characteristics. For example, criminal convictions were a dominant characteristic in about 70% of those suburbs across New South Wales. There were also significant rates of adult imprisonment, juvenile offending, where unemployment, low income, poor education, and domestic violence were also a feature. The report also found that the disadvantage in some of these areas isn't improving, and the social support structures aimed at addressing chronic aspects of disadvantage are simply not working in some parts of our country. The situation in these communities is dire and has now come to be described as part of the Australian vernacular as Struggle Street. Now, Struggle Street was on TV a few years ago. I'm not sure how many people were able to see it, but many people who saw Struggle Street were shocked and found it confronting and difficult to watch. And it is difficult to watch. I personally found it distressing to watch. But people had the choice, all of us had the choice to switch Struggle Street off if we wanted to and maybe put a different program on. Unfortunately, for those living on Struggle Street, particularly children, this is their reality each and every day of the week. Looking back now, I know that I was one who grew up on Struggle Street. But unlike many who grew up there, I was one of the lucky ones who was able to escape. I grew up in a housing commission suburb called East Narrow, where I lived with my grandparents and my 2 younger sisters. I had very limited contact with my mother as a child and was separated from my father from around the age of 4 until I turned 18. My grandparents stepped in to provide care for my 2 younger sisters and I due to family breakdown and my mother's mental illness challenges she faced. Even though we were undoubtedly poor by anyone's measure, we never felt that way. We had a roof over our heads, clothes on our backs and 3 meals a day. We were safe, we were loved. which is a heck of a lot more than what I can say for far too many young people across our country. My grandmother, Rhonda, is a truly amazing woman. She's taught me more than I'll ever be able to appreciate. She's faced so many hurdles and challenges in her own life, including horrific domestic violence at the hands of her brutal first husband, my real grandfather. And she could have been anything she wanted to be, but unfortunately she didn't get the education and had hurdle after hurdle placed in her path. I think that's part of the reason why she's always been so determined to make sure that my two sisters and I could achieve what she wasn't able to. She always strived to give us the best despite our limited means and wanted us to be able to achieve whatever we wanted in life and to have a limitless future. But she also recognised that in order for us to even have a small chance or a basic shot at that ambition she had for us, she needed help. My grandparents simply couldn't have done it on their own. They were both pensioners, and even a half-decent public school education is expensive. That's where the Smith family came in. From around the age of 12, I was sponsored as a Learning for Life student, and right from the very start it made an enormous difference in terms of the opportunities which were now open to me. I completed high school as the dux of my year group, got the marks to get into law, and just a few weeks ago, sorry, it wasn't a few weeks ago, I haven't updated the speech. Over a year ago now, I graduated from my law and commerce degree and managed to secure a job with one of the most highly regarded law firms in New South Wales. I believe that my own experience is indicative of what is needed to help turn around struggle street communities, or at the very least to give people who live there, who grew up there, a ticket out of there. Education is the key. Education is without a doubt the great enabler. Education is the only way to restore opportunity to these communities and to lift people out of poverty. Education is the most powerful tool we have available, and education allows upward mobility within a single generation. Regardless of all those factors I mentioned earlier, postcode, your parents' income level, your ethnicity, if you have a good education, you have the capacity to be somebody. You can make something of yourself. If we can just give these kids who call Struggle Street home a good education, there's absolutely no reason why they should have to abandon their dreams. Those dreams they would have had as they lied awake in bed at night, aspiring for a better future, aspiring to rise. Whilst many of the programs of the Smith family are mainly targeted at financially disadvantaged students, many still are focused on helping all kids do better in the classroom regardless of their financial situation. And as Marianne cited earlier, across the programs, well over 100,000 students are being supported through the literacy programs and others. We plainly, as a country, need to do more to improve our education system if we are to have a chance to compete in such a complex and highly globalised international economy. Our people are our greatest commodity and can potentially be our most valuable export. Don't worry about that stuff we dig up out of the ground. Our people are our most valuable commodity. It therefore should be a major focus of government to improve the system so that it is more responsive and in touch with the needs of the 21st century. There are, of course, many different structures and education reform proposals, including charter schools and vouchers, which may have a positive impact. However, what the Smith family achieves and the approach it takes is truly unique. The difference between what the Smith family does and conventional policy wisdom from politicians and bureaucrats is that it isn't just about investing more money. In fact, simply pumping more money into the system doesn't make much of a difference. What the Smith family recognises is that targeted financial support with inbuilt accountability mechanisms and mutual obligation on the part of parents, students and teachers is the way to go. The Smith family understands that it isn't just extra financial support that makes the difference, although extra financial support does help even the playing field. But the intangible benefit of a child knowing that someone in the world cares about them and their potential is what has the greatest impact. So many students are simply looking for someone who believes in them and wants them to succeed in life. That's why the Smith family places such a strong emphasis on mentorship opportunities and proven peer-to-peer learning experiences. Combine that with the extra financial support they need to give them a fair shot at life, their lives can be dramatically turned around. As I've said over and over throughout my address today, all kids deserve to be able to live their dreams. It shouldn't matter what school they go to. Shouldn't matter whether they go to some of the best independent schools in the state, Knox Grammar, Scots, King's, or even to my old primary school, Narrie's Public School, which I believe is right up there with those other schools. But if you were to go to any school in this country, any school in this state, and you were to talk to the kids in the kindergarten class, and you were to ask them that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? They will invariably respond with positive aspirations of wanting to be doctors, nurses, teachers, scientists. They all want to be somebody. They don't come out and say that they want to live on welfare for the rest of their lives. They don't say that they want to live in public housing for the rest of their lives. They all have an aspiration, a goal, a path in mind that they want to follow. Now, I'm often asked what I would have said if you'd asked me what I wanted to be back in kindergarten. Well, to begin with, I probably would have mentioned my brief flirtation with wanting to become a pirate after seeing The Muppets Treasure Island. Instead, I became a lawyer. My grandmother would probably still recall in horror as if she were reminded of how apparently I used to walk around saying, gosh, I wish someone would cut my arm off so I could be a real pirate. I guess I didn't see the macabre side of that as a child. But aside from wanting to be a buccaneer, I probably would have told you that I'd like to become Prime Minister of Australia one day. If you ask me the same question today, I can tell you that my answer hasn't changed. It has truly been a privilege to join you today at this meeting and to enjoy lunch with you today, and to be able to share some of my insights into this important issue. It is something that I am passionate about. It is an area that I've been proud to devote my time and energy towards in recent years. Everybody has a right to their God-given purpose in life, and nobody should have that taken away from them. Through the transformative power of education, we can make sure that everyone has the right to be somebody, the right to step out of the shadows, and yes, the right to rise. Thank you very much.